Or, les bombardements reprennent aujourd'hui, de plus belle même.
Mais, pardon, je suis là. C'est sûr que pour avoir des négociations, il faut que les deux parties soient de bonne foi. Le problème présentement, c'est qu'on voit qu'il y a un côté qui est clairement de mauvaise foi. Et bien entendu, on condamne les bombardements qui ont eu lieu récemment, mais en particulier aujourd'hui sur un des édifices de la Croix-Rouge.
Est-ce que ça veut dire que le Canada va procéder dès aujourd'hui à l'annonce de nouvelles sanctions contre la Russie?
Je vous l'ai dit hier, il va y avoir des sanctions qui vont être annoncées sous peu. On va continuer à mettre énormément de pression sur le régime russe. Il ne faut pas arrêter parce qu'on voit que les combats continuent.
Êtes-vous en mesure de nous en dire davantage sur le rôle que pourrait jouer le Canada comme pays garant de l'Ukraine dont il a été question hier?
C'est sûr qu'on a des conversations avec les Ukrainiens. Le président Zelensky et le premier ministre Trudeau se parlent fréquemment. Mon collègue et moi, Dimitro Kuleba et moi, nous parlons fréquemment. Et les Ukrainiens savent qu'on peut avoir des conversations au cours desquelles on se fait extrêmement confiance. Alors, on va continuer de les appuyer, soit via des sanctions, soit via des armes, ou soit via des conseils pour faire en sorte qu'un jour, on trouve une solution diplomatique.
Ça prendrait
quelle forme cette idée d'être garant de la sécurité pour l'Ukraine?
Je ne peux pas aller dans les détails parce que, bien entendu, les négociations ont lieu. Mais on le sait qu'une solution diplomatique un jour pourra être trouvée, parce que c'est toujours le cas à chaque fois qu'il y a malheureusement des combats. Mais là, pour l'instant, présentement, ce qu'on doit faire, c'est vraiment aider les Ukrainiens sur les lignes de front, parce qu'ils sont très certainement face à une menace russe extrêmement persistante.
Can we get your reaction to Russia continuing bombardment despite saying it would pull back military efforts in Ukraine? Does this sort of ruin any chance for a diplomatic solution moving forward? And what is Canada's role, just to wrap everything up, what is Canada's role in trying to bring about that diplomatic solution?
Well, clearly this is completely horrific what is happening, because we see that while negotiations are still ongoing, clearly both parties are not able to trust each other. Why? Because Russia is not showing good faith. Canada condemns the bombing of a Red Cross facility by Russia. We are extremely concerned with the dire situation happening in Mariupol, and we will continue to support the Ukrainian side as, obviously, Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom and their lives.
Thank you so much, guys. We've got to go.
I'll just take another one. Yeah, I'll just take another one. Because I answered 3 in French, I need to answer in English as well. Adrien is starting, so.
Yes, thank you very much, Minister. And do you think Russia would accept Canada or other NATO countries acting as security guarantors in Ukraine, given their stance?
Sorry, can you start again? I was just thinking about Adrien.
Sorry. Do you think Russia would accept Canada or other NATO member nations acting as security guarantors in Ukraine, given their stance that Ukraine not be a part of NATO?
Well, like I answered to Hélène just a bit earlier, I won't go into the details of the negotiations, but what I can tell you, though, is we're in clear constant contact with our Ukrainian counterparts. President Zelensky and Prime Minister Trudeau talk to each other very often. I'm in contact also with my counterpart. And obviously, Ukrainians facing a very dire situation are seeking our advice and our support. We are showing that we are supporting them through sanctions, through also lethal and non-lethal aid. But at the same time, we know that diplomacy is fundamental, because in the case of many conflicts, diplomacy becomes at the end very important to solve the conflict. And we know that diplomacy will continue throughout this conflict. So that's why we will continue to be in contact with them. At the same time, we're in contact with many other countries, and that's why also I'll be meeting with my G7 colleagues next week. Okay. Thank you.
Why do you think that Ukrainians coming on work visas should also have, or should they also get federal services as if they were refugees?
So we made a decision to extend settlement services to people who are coming. One of the things that's difficult to assess is the needs of different groups who are going to be arriving. Typically, when we're bringing people in as refugees, when we are selecting people on the basis of their vulnerability, we know that they're going to need extensive supports. With the situation in Ukraine, there are some people who are going to have that same level of vulnerability, and there's others who may not need the same scale of services. But we made the decision to err on the side of providing services to people, because we would hate to see somebody get here and not be supported. So we're working right now with over 500 settlement agencies across Canada to make sure that those supports are there. Things like language training, employment assistance, those soft landing skills to make sure a person's set up for success when they arrive.
Does that extend as well to the lump sum amount or the monthly payment that refugees, for example, the Syrian refugees, when they arrived, they were getting $1,500 a month for a certain amount of time. Does that also apply to the Ukrainians?
So the decision we've made and shared details of this week is about support and access to the services provided through settlement agencies.
So no money.
We're continuing to have conversations right now about what other measures we may advance. As you can appreciate, we continue to do more and more as time goes on, as we understand the unique needs of different groups that are going to be arriving. I'd suggest that we're continuing to work on a number of these other different supports to make sure that we're setting people up for success. But just in the past number of weeks, when I look at the suite of measures we put forward, I think you could tell these conversations continue in real time. But the decision that we've shared details of earlier this week is about access to settlement ports through agencies, not direct income support.
So just to make sure I understand, settlement for like finding an apartment, settlement to like work in the banking system, settlement to try to find a place here and find a work, but not necessarily some amount of money in their pocket like you would do for regular refugees.
Yes, so this is a different thing than direct income supports.
So why not give them that support? Because some of them are not leaving an apartment to go here and find a job. They're leaving a refugee camp to come here with no job. Same thing as a regular refugee would be. So why would you not extend the amount of money that you would give to a regular refugee?
Well, we're still having conversations with about the different measures that we may advance to support people once they arrive. This particular decision is really, really important, though, and I don't want to dismiss it as being something that's insignificant. When I visit settlement agencies, some of the most important things that people benefit from are things like language training skills, are things like assistance in navigating the local economy to make sure people can find a job and support themselves, making sure that they are well-oriented with the lay of the land in their new community, everything from learning how to set up a bank account to learning how to ride the bus. There are a lot of people who are coming here who may not need those services because they have been to Canada before, perhaps they have family in the area, perhaps they have a long and storied work history and are going to be able to support themselves. There are a lot of other people who are going to desperately need these services to make sure that they can't just get here, but they're not left destitute when they arrive and they can actually learn to navigate their new community. We don't know how long people are going to be staying. We've obviously started with a 3-year open work permit that will allow people to stay for that period of time. Some may choose not to be that long, be here that long if it's safe for them to return home sooner. But we want to make sure as soon as they arrive, they have access to these agencies so they can better navigate life in their new community.
Would you be able to give an estimate of how many Ukrainians we will receive for the month of April?
It's difficult to say because one of the things that I'm hearing when I have conversations with people who are actually on the ground is that there's a lot of applications coming. Just to put it into perspective, we've got somewhere in the ballpark, this will be stale data by a few days, but as of a couple of days ago, we've seen approximately 60,000 applications come in through the new expedited program that we've established, and that's only since we opened the program on March 17th. And that's in addition to since the beginning of the year, we're now approximately 12,000 people have arrived in Canada, and we had somewhere in the ballpark of 9,000 to 10,000 who'd applied to have the expedited process before the new program came online. That said, we have a lot of applications coming in, but there's a big difference between somebody being approved to come to Canada and somebody actually choosing to come to Canada. We're hearing on the ground right now that a lot of people who are thinking of coming not just to Canada but elsewhere in Europe, they want to stay close. They are in love with the idea of returning home to Ukraine when it's safe. But they want to make sure that they're exercising what options they have to find safe haven should it be needed. So it's difficult to say with precision.
But that doesn't mean that they're willing to actually do the whole...
That's obviously a choice. It's up to the individual. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to come should they feel the need to seek safe haven in Canada. But certainly we're not going to tell someone that they shouldn't come or that they should come if they actually would prefer to stay close. I had a conversation last week with the Commissioner of the EU who reiterated for me that they're seeing a lot of people wanting to stay close to the western border of Ukraine, even though it's become very, very challenging on the countries in the region. But they have a real hope that they're going to be successful in defending their homeland, and they have an honestly held belief that they're going to be able to return home before too long. Time will tell whether that's going to remain an option for them, so we're doing whatever we can to provide a flexible pathway to get to Canada as quickly as possible with limited number of barriers.
Is the 14 days delay of process respected as far as you know
for now?
So far, yeah, and what we're seeing right now, it's actually a really unique and innovative approach that we've been able to take. Because we can move resources to where we're watching very closely the flow of people, and we can move resources to where the volumes of people are moving to. So for example, 2 days ago, we had new staff show up in, I believe, 7 different locations, but primarily the largest team that we've sent over to supplement the existing staff is in Warsaw. So we've been moving our biometric kits and the people who know how to process these cases as quickly as possible when we see populations moving to new areas. To have that flexibility to actually set up the infrastructure we need to process people where they are moving to is a real-time exercise. It's fascinating to see that we actually have the ability to be this flexible and to set the infrastructure up where people are moving in real time. It's not necessarily an easy thing, but it's an essential thing if we're going to manage things as quickly as possible. We're also navigating some very difficult local laws about the hours a person is allowed to work, the days a person is allowed to work. So when we go to extend the hours in Warsaw, for example, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., we actually have to negotiate access to exemptions around the labor laws to have people work extended hours and to offer services. So there's really unique challenges, and when we're dealing not just with Warsaw, but with Vienna, with Bratislava, with Bucharest, and all the other locations that we've set up visa application centers, it's a really unique challenge, and it's a lot of work, but it's essential work, and it's really a privilege to be able to lead this on behalf of Canada.
Could you lift the biometrics exemption to other categories, and if not, consider why not?
So the reason that we've insisted on biometrics is because we do want to ensure, if we're taking in potentially an unlimited number of applications, that we have some security screening process. We made a decision effective 2 days ago to actually remove the biometric requirements to certain low-risk cohorts. So younger people, senior citizens, people who have a travel history to Canada where they abided by the rules and have proper documentation. We're taking an evidence-based approach to make sure we're not jeopardizing the security outcomes, but are still having a process that will allow as many people to get here as quickly as possible.
How many people are subject to that lifting of biometric?
You know, it's a really tough thing because it's a program we built on purpose to be driven by demand, not an allocation of certain people. So we don't actually know the specific numbers until we see these applications come in. And sometimes when you shift the rules, you could potentially see people's behavior change to increase that number of applications. So we won't really know until we see these applications coming in. And given that this change was just put in place on Monday, we don't yet have the data to say how many people will no longer be required to do this.
60,000
Yes. Okay, sorry guys, I do have to run. So, look, I'll have to be my final question. I always have the bad habit of sticking around too long here. So we're having conversations with different airlines. We've already seen through a very generous private donation and arrangement, a plane landed in Edmonton just 2 days ago. We've been working on smaller scale works with some of the pediatric cancer patients. The Sick Kids Hospital has been phenomenal to deal with, and we're playing a facilitative role. We're still having conversations about what more we can do to facilitate the entry of other people into Canada, but we'll obviously have more to report when we have news. I do have to go, guys. I really do. Thank you. Thank you.
Au niveau de la Cour criminelle internationale, qui on envoie, quel travail ils vont faire?
Donc, au cause de l'invasion illégale de M. Poutine, nous avons regardé plein des exemples des atrocités qui étaient visitées sur le peuple ukrainien. C'était inacceptable. Il faut, ceux qui sont responsables pour cette atrocité, peuvent porter avant un tribunal, avant le Cour criminelle internationale, ce qu'il y a la justice. Donc ça, c'est la raison qu'on avait lancé, la GRC avait lancé un projet où il y a une équipe qui a l'expertise, la qualification pour collecter les preuves.
Pourquoi c'est important d'y aller maintenant pour collecter quel type de preuves?
Parce qu'il faut préserver le record. Il faut garder toutes les preuves pour ce qu'il y a, la justice. Et c'est un exercice qu'il faut commencer maintenant, en temps réel, à le moment actuel.
Pour rencontrer des gens qui sont là, qui sont des témoins, qui ces gens-là vont rencontrer?
Donc, ça, c'est des décisions opérationnelles dans le contexte de l'enquête, de l'investigation. Mais, par exemple, il peut parler avec, il peut collecter les témoignages, peut collecter les preuves, peut identifier les personnes d'intérêt, et c'est très important. Merci beaucoup.
Jonathan Vance is pled guilty to one count of obstruction of justice. What's your reaction to his guilty plea?
Well, look, the matter is before the courts, and although Mr. Vance has pled guilty, there's still a sentencing component to that exercise, and so it would be inappropriate for me or for any other member of the government to be commenting on a matter that's before the
When are we
courts.
going to get the public inquiry on the trucker convoy?
Juste sur les armes à feu, votre projet de loi arrive quand sur les armes d'assaut?
Pardon?
Sur les armes d'assaut, les armes à feu.
Oui.
Ouais.
Donc,
votre projet de loi est pour ça, parce que vous disiez aussitôt que
aussitôt
possible, il y a
aussitôt que possible, exactement. Mais écoute, on continuait avec une stratégie qui est tellement proactive, avec des investissements pour les forces policières. Juste la dernière semaine, j'ai une rencontre à Washington, D.C. avec mon homologue américain, M. Mayorkas, où nous parlerons de tous les travaux sur le terrain concret pour arrêter le trafic des armes à feu. Et dans le contexte de le projet de loi, je continuais des engagements, des conversations avec tous les stakeholders pour comprendre leur input, leurs suggestions, leurs propositions aussitôt que possible.
Okay. Last question in English.
Waive biometrics requirements for Afghan interpreters and their families fleeing from Afghanistan, and if not, why not?
Well, look, first and foremost, I will just say that it is imperative that when it comes to providing a safe haven for those Ukrainians who have fled their homes as a result of the atrocities that we're seeing visited upon them day in and day out, or whether it's with regards to helping those Afghans who've had to flee their country as a result of the Taliban. This country has a well-established record for setting up humanitarian corridors that are efficient, that reduce the paperwork, and we're working very closely right across government to make sure that we can receive those Ukrainians and those Afghans as quickly as possible. In fact, I would just point out that today Minister Fraser will be at Toronto Pearson International to welcome the 10,000th Afghan refugees since we launched the program about a little less than a half year ago. And we've already seen more than 10,000 Ukrainians arrive since the beginning of 2022, with thousands more coming. So we're absolutely focused to make this process as flexible and as efficient as possible.
Pouvez-vous nous offrir une réaction au développement dans la cause de M. Vance?
Oui, ce n'est pas mon rôle de commenter sur une cas criminelle comme ça, mais c'est ma responsabilité de bâtir une institution où tout le monde peut travailler sans discrimination et avec le respect et les protections chaque jour.
Minister, is the guilty plea a victory in stamping out sexual misconduct? Is this a victory in that?
As I said in French just now, it is not my role to comment on the results of an individual criminal case with an individual defendant. However, as Minister of National Defense, my responsibility is to continue to build an institution where everyone can work with the respect and the protections that they need to do their jobs on behalf of our country. Thank you so much.
Bien, en fait, le ministre de l'Environnement, hier, a annoncé notre plan de lutte contre, pour diminuer les émissions. Il y avait d'excellentes nouvelles pour le secteur agricole. On augmente de façon significative le budget pour aider les producteurs à acquérir des équipements éco-énergétiques, à adopter des bonnes pratiques aussi. Alors, c'était de très, très bonnes nouvelles pour le secteur agricole hier.
Est-ce que c'est le temps pour les gens de Stansted de revoir un petit peu de serrage de ceinture dans un budget qui est un peu louche depuis 2-3 ans? Là. Les gens ils veulent un petit peu de...
Les gens veulent qu'on lutte contre les changements climatiques. Le secteur agricole doit absolument être un partenaire. Et je sens chez les producteurs agricoles, les productrices, vraiment une volonté d'en faire plus. Donc, il faut continuer à investir dans la recherche, dans l'innovation, s'assurer que nos nouvelles connaissances sont partagées auprès des producteurs agricoles pour pouvoir faire une différence.
you know, we can't comment on the budget. What I can say is that we've invested $15 billion into the tourism and hardest hit sector. And you know that in December, when we had C2 in place, it was supposed to be $7 billion, became another $12 billion. And I've recently met with the BC tourism industry, with the National Council, the National Convention for Indigenous Tourism. And I can say this, the numbers are up. My team has met with Beth Potter and Susie Grenell. The numbers are up. I thank everybody in the tourism sector for doing more. And the fact that April 1st the tests come off is a really good sign for the traveling public. And I want to see this sector come back because the Canadian economy won't fully recover until the tourism sector does.
The sector has said that it might take some more time. Just because April 1st the masks are lifted, it's going to be some time. If I'm correct on this, a lot of these benefits that they're currently accepting end in May, and they're looking for an extension on that. Can they be hopeful that they'll still get some support in this slow recovery time?
So I won't comment on the budget. What I can say is that these supports were always intended to be temporary, and we did extend them with C2 in December to get the tourism sector through the worst of Omicron. And so we're going to continue to support the tourism sector. And just so that everybody remembers, the Tourism Relief Fund, $500 million, is still available for tourism organizations from across the country. And so we'll be following that very closely.
À quel point c'est important pour vous dans le budget? Il y a une certaine rigueur budgétaire, un plan de retour à l'équilibre budgétaire ou au moins un début de plan. Certains de vos collègues disent que c'est essentiel. Pour vous, c'est...
Mais regarde, moi je viens de l'Alberta et moi je suis un fiscaliste et moi je pense que tous les investissements qu'on a faits auprès des Canadiens et Canadiennes étaient essentiels. On a vu le succès de ce plan dans les chiffres qu'on a maintenant avec 112% des 3 millions d'employés déjà récupérés et le fait qu'on a un des plus croissants pays au monde. En même temps, il faut qu'on regarde ces questions de prudence et vraiment faire certain qu'on fait ce qu'on a dit dans la plateforme, de retourner à des budgets, pas question de plus raisonnable, mais avec des déficits pas dans le même ordre qu'on a vu pendant le COVID.
Il y a des gens de l'industrie qui disent que l'aide à l'industrie touristique devrait continuer jusqu'au mois de septembre prochain. Est-ce que vous êtes en faveur de ça?
Ce que je peux dire, parce que je peux commenter sur le budget, c'est que les mesures qu'on a mises en place pour le secteur touristique, et on parle des dizaines de milliards de dollars, étaient des supports temporaires. Et je sais que les supports sont là jusqu'en mai. Comme je viens de dire à vos collègues, on a toujours le fonds de relève touristique qui est un demi-milliard de dollars qui est disponible pour les organismes sur le terrain. Et ce fonds est ouvert jusqu'à l'an prochain. Et ça, c'est des subventions jusqu'à un demi-million de dollars pour les organismes sur le terrain. Merci tout le monde.
Do you think Toronto should be in the bidding for the 2026 World Cup? And will the federal government provide any supports to the city?
Toronto is creating a bid right now for the FIFA World Cup in 2026. There are the other cities in the running. We're super happy that Canada got chosen to host this wonderful event. So we'll see which cities between Vancouver, Edmonton, and Toronto. But Toronto sure has a great bid.
How is the federal government going to
que Montréal ne sera pas dans cette... justement, qu'on n'accueillera pas la Coupe du Monde?
Ben, c'est un choix que la Ville de Montréal a fait, qu'on respecte évidemment. Nous, notre travail comme gouvernement fédéral, c'est de travailler avec les villes qui souhaitent déposer une offre et avec les provinces également.
C'est dommage.
Ben, c'est une belle opportunité d'accueillir la FIFA. Il y a des retombées économiques importantes aussi qui viennent avec. C'est une opportunité pour les villes qui vont l'accueillir. Je vous remercie.
Les organisations qui ont dû annuler des événements sportifs et qui subissent encore les contre-coups de la COVID, est-ce qu'ils vont continuer à pouvoir compter sur des mesures d'aide?
Les mesures d'aide ne sont pas encore épuisées. On est encore là pour accompagner les organisations, que ce soit dans l'organisation des événements ou encore pour couvrir des frais additionnels qui sont venus avec la COVID lors de la participation dans des événements internationaux. Donc, il y a encore de l'argent qui est disponible pour cette année. Je vous remercie.
Well, I think the folks in my riding are going to be looking forward to the plan that we're putting forward for the country.
So I'm letting you time to think about it, maybe, but a little bit of more fiscal restraint, maybe. Sometimes the people in the...
Well, I think for Calgary Skyview, public transit extremely important in infrastructure, and we want to continue to make sure we build public transit for Calgarians. And I think for my constituents, that's an important issue of infrastructure and transportation.
Are you kind of concerned that the idea of fiscal restraint, for example, seems to have been abandoned in the past few years?
You know, it's always, that's gonna always be a priority for our government and for myself as well. I spent a number of years on city council working hard. Fiscal responsibility is definitely a priority for me and our government.
Do you want defense spending to be 2%? Do you support the movement of defense spending up to 2%?
I'm open to looking at what's available to make sure that our armed forces are well equipped, to make sure that they can serve Canada.
Oh, and Mr. Joel, we haven't seen any caps come out for the oil sector in the climate plan, just lots of talk of consultation. With 2030 goals quickly approaching, just, what do you make of, still not really putting in these caps in the oil sector, doesn't really know what they're working towards at this point?
Well, emission reductions is our goal, and we're focused on that. In committee, we're doing a lot of work on that and working with industry stakeholders and Canadians to hear their views. But we need to do our part with the environment, but also support industry across Canada and protect jobs, and which are extremely important for my region and my city.
But just to go back to the, sorry.
Oh, just one quick follow-up. Just, would the lack of a cap then be sort of like a job mechanism, just as we try to figure out what's going on here, and especially with the plans to increase exports, is it just not the time to bring those caps in?
Well, emissions reduction is our focus. We need to reduce the emissions that impact our environment, but we need to work with industry for a path forward to protect Canadian jobs and workers across the country. And it's extremely important that we collaborate and engage with industry and with Canadians and provinces and municipalities to make sure we bring forward the appropriate actions to reduce emissions, but also protect our economy.
Just to go back to the budget, is it essential to you to see some sort of path towards, not necessarily a balanced budget, but towards fiscal restraint? Some of your colleagues say that it has to be in there if you don't want to lose blue Liberals, if you don't want to give ammunition to the Conservatives. How I know you said you'd like to see it, but how important is it? Is it essential?
Well, I think, politics aside, I think we've come through a very challenging time in our country with COVID. Challenges that many provinces have faced and municipalities, and our government took strong action to support Canadians through this difficult time. But as we move forward, we have to chart a course on how we can strengthen our economy and make sure we look at the challenges that we're going to be faced with in the future.
Thanks.
Any comment on Jason Kenney's memes?
I haven't seen any new recent memes, the Premier, but I'll leave that to my friends in the province of Alberta to comment on. All right. Thank you.
Pour être honnête, non, pas dans les dernières heures, mais on a beaucoup échangé dans les dernières semaines. On était régulièrement en contact, évidemment, pour s'occuper de la COVID, mais on a aussi l'occasion de changer à plusieurs reprises sur les priorités du gouvernement du Québec en matière de santé, qui étaient totalement alignées avec les priorités qu'on entendait aussi ailleurs dans le pays. Donc, on est très heureux de voir qu'on va pouvoir continuer à travailler ensemble au cours des prochains mois et peut-être même des prochaines années.
Mais de manière générale, avez-vous parlé à vos collègues provinciaux, par exemple, sur cette idée de l'assurance dentaire? C'est supposé d'être 10 cette année pour les moins de 12 ans, 13 ans. Avez-vous une indication qu'ils sont d'accord avec ça?
Il y a beaucoup de travail à faire sur l'assurance dentaire. Comme vous le saviez, ce n'était pas une priorité du gouvernement dans le discours du trône, ce n'était pas non plus dans la plateforme de la campagne là, en septembre dernier. Donc il y a beaucoup de travail à faire là-dessus et on va le faire avec le NPD parce que c'est un engagement qu'on a pris avec eux.
Mais la question c'est quel écho avez-vous de la part des provinces? Est-ce qu'elles sont ouvertes à ça? Je pense par exemple à l'assurance médicaments de 2 ans à leur conseil de fédération et vous avez presque tout unanimement dit on n'en veut pas. Alors je me demande sur les dents, est-ce qu'elles disent la même chose?
Comme je le dis, sur l'assurance dentaire, on n'a pas eu de discussion encore. Et évidemment, ces discussions vont être importantes. Le respect des compétences, c'est la priorité. C'est un des 3 R dans la règle des 3 R que j'utilise. la responsabilité partagée et les résultats, évidemment, aussi. Mais sur l'assurance dentaire, comme je l'ai dit, il y a très peu d'échanges qui ont eu lieu jusqu'à maintenant.
Quand est-ce que vous comptez entamer ces échanges-là, alors? Parce que dans l'entente avec le NPD, il y a quand même des choses qui doivent se passer cette année. Là. Donc, quand est-ce que vous...
On va faire les choses dans le bon ordre. Là, pour l'instant, on a besoin, nous, au gouvernement canadien, avec mon équipe de fonctionnaires, là, de commencer à comprendre le dossier, puis ensuite, on pourra en dire davantage.
Mais avez-vous un échéancier?
Vous dites qu'il y a beaucoup de travail à faire. Pouvez-vous élaborer?
Bien, premièrement, du travail, un portrait de ce qui se passe présentement à l'échelle du pays. Les provinces et territoires, les compagnies d'assurance, à la fois avec les entreprises et de manière privée, directement avec les gens, ont déjà des mécanismes d'assurance dentaire, comme on le sait. Donc, il faut commencer à faire le portrait de ce qui existe déjà pour ensuite établir la suite. Je vous laisse.
Thanks. Provinces and territories are still asking for an increase in healthcare transfers, so are they going to be disappointed in the new budget?
Well, we'll see what the budget will contain, but just a few days ago, on Friday, we announced an additional and unconditional $2 billion investment to support provinces and territories, in particular on their priority of reducing backlogs in surgeries, treatments, and diagnosis.
And what about interfering in provincial jurisdiction? We've heard some say that you should not be getting into pharmacare or dental care, that's their domain. What do you have to say about that?
Well, we are going to work on the basis of the priorities that provinces and territories have been sharing with us for the last few months. No? Obviously, some of them are more connected to COVID-19. I mentioned the issue of backlogs on surgeries, treatments, and diagnosis. But we know there is a lot more to do, and that's what we hope to be doing with them in the context of respecting jurisdiction, sharing responsibility, and focusing on results. Thank you.
Cities across the country are getting the bill for RCMP contract retroactive pay. In the case of Surrey, it's over $40 million. Cities are saying they don't have the funds for this. Will you help municipalities out?
The short answer is yes. We're working very closely with municipalities as well as with provincial governments who contract the RCMP as the police of jurisdiction. I'll just underline that the RCMP provide an incredibly important service across the country, particularly in smaller rural communities who don't have the capacity on their own to provide police of jurisdiction. At the same time, there are independent processes that do set out compensation. So, for example, the RCMP were recently unionized. There are collective bargaining agreements. Those collective bargaining agreements set out compensatory schedules. So we have to respect those processes, and we also have to respect the fact that in many of these instances where there are, for example, retro pay issues, that those conversations are occurring both with provincial and municipalities. But we value the service that the RCMP provide to ensure public safety across the country. In order for them to be able to recruit and retain people, we need to be sure that there's fair compensation, and we're committed to working with municipalities to ensure that they can meet that goal.
Did you consult municipalities before agreeing?
Well, long before I took this job as Minister of Public Safety, my department has been engaged with various levels of government, including municipalities. We're continuing to keep open lines of communication and reconciling what we're hearing from the ground in municipalities around the challenges of making sure that they're properly staffed with the independent processes that I've referred to. So collective bargaining as well as the conversations which are occurring at the officials level.
Avoir un chef d'État-major qui plaide coupable, quel message s'envoie à la société canadienne?
Sur lequel?
Un chef d'État-major, M. Vance, qui plaide coupable.
Mais écoute, c'est un processus qui est devant le tribunal. C'est pas correct. C'est très inapproprié pour un membre de le gouvernement pour commentaire sur ce sujet. Mais en même temps, je sais que la ministre Anand a démontré beaucoup de leadership pour un changement de culture dans le département de défense nationale.
Est-ce que ça souligne justement l'importance d'un changement de culture, de fait qu'un chef d'état-major, c'est pas n'importe qui, c'est le numéro 1 de l'armée qui plaide coupable?
Mais encore une fois, c'était inapproprié pour un membre du gouvernement de commentaire sur un cas qui est devant la Cour, mais le leadership de la ministre Anand et même du gouvernement pour un changement culturel dans le DND est tellement important.
Minister, the charge itself had little to do or nothing with sexual misconduct. So how is this a victory? How does it mark, the work of Minister Anand trying to change culture? What difference does it make?
Well, I would just simply say again in English that it would be inappropriate for a member of the government to comment on a matter that is before the courts, including with regards to the sentencing process. But at the same time, Minister Anand is leading the cultural change that is required at DND to ensure that women and indeed everyone can work and contribute to the work of Department of National Defence in an environment that is free from sexual harassment and violence of all forms. Thank you very much. Merci. Merci.
6 avril, ça va faire 6 mois qu'on doit commencer la revue.
OK, donc
c'est pas avoir une
décision
décision le
tombe
6
pas le 6
avril.
avril.
C'était pas le mi-août, l'obligation vaccinale? Ah, c'est l'entrée en vigueur.
L'entrée en vigueur, qui
OK.
était le 6 octobre.
D'accord. Et y a-t-il une considération d'étendre ça à la 3e dose?
Ça aussi, ça fait partie de la revue, de pouvoir définir qu'est-ce qu'on veut dire par pleinement vacciné. Alors, on est en train de regarder ça.
As Minister for Ottawa, do you see the Senator's arena now moving downtown with the death of Eugene Melnick?
Well, first of all, I think we have to bring our condolences to the family of Eugene Melnick, and I imagine we will be hearing about what the position for the senators will be.
Juste sur les fonctionnaires, il y en a combien qui se sont mis en congé maladie pour éviter l'obligation vaccinale? Savez-vous ce chiffre-là?
Non, c'est des questions confidentielles. Alors, je pense que c'est important de garder cette représentation là, de leur confidentialité. Je peux vous dire, par contre, que plusieurs étaient à l'analyse pour avoir un accommodement parce qu'ils l'ont demandé. Puis, les départements, les superviseurs des départements sont les responsables de faire cette évaluation.
Et d'ailleurs, sur cette question, sur la question religieuse, il y a eu des demandes d'accommodement religieux. On est où et quel était le critère pour accepter? Parce qu'il n'y a aucune religion qui s'oppose à la vaccination. Alors, pourquoi est-ce que ces demandes-là ont été acceptées?
Bien, comme vous savez, la Commission des droits humains avait mentionné que la question religieuse devait être étudiée. Donc, ça a été un des critères qu'on a utilisé pour pouvoir voir s'il y avait accommodement possible.
Mais est-ce que vous pensez que le stade pour les sénateurs bouge à la centre-ville quand M. Melnick est décédé?
Je n'ai pas de position à ce propos-là présentement. I don't have a position about this at this time.
C'est pour Radio-Canada, je pose une question.
Oui, alors...
C'est pour le café. Est-ce que vous répétez pour le café? Brièvement.
J'ai juste
Pardon, juste pour vous dire que à ce moment-ci, j'ai pas une position, mais je sais que dans notre caucus, on va avoir des discussions et avec la communauté, donc on va laisser le temps pouvoir nous permettre de prendre une position.
Je veux juste revenir sur la question religieuse. Je comprends qu'il fallait prévoir ce cas de figure, mais dans la mesure où aucune grande religion ne préconise de ne pas se faire vacciner, pourquoi des demandes d'accommodement religieuses ont été acceptées, accordées? C'était en vertu de quels critères?
Encore là, j'aimerais plutôt revenir à la politique où les deux éléments devaient être regardés et les équipes des superviseurs ont, pour ceux qui ont fait une demande d'accommodement, soit au niveau religieux ou au niveau de choix, a fait en sorte que la décision a été prise ou non. Puis il y en a encore qui sont en évaluation d'accommodement.
Oui, mais je pose la question parce que plusieurs pensent que c'était un passe-droit, qu'on avait juste à dire « je suis Jedi » et hop, on n'a plus besoin de se faire vacciner.
Ça ne se fait pas si facilement que ça dans les évaluations des équipes. Je pense que le critère était dans la politique pour pouvoir respecter la question que ça pouvait être un choix dans les critères de sélection pour un accommodement, mais je vous dirais que ça a été plutôt regardé à l'intérieur des équipes de supervision. Et là, on est en train de faire la revue présentement. Merci beaucoup.